Building is arguably the main focus of Minecraft, and no matter what your playstyle is, you'll end up building something at some point. Yet building isn't exactly the easiest thing to learn. I have a fairly unique building strategy that I think will help you out even if you have watched other tutorials. My basic design philosophy in Minecraft boils down to one sentence: a building is the sum of its parts. Now that might seem obvious, but a lot of people don't think this way when building. I've put together this here shell of a house to demonstrate how a building is the sum of its parts. Basically, each of these colors is a different section. We have the basement, or not basement, first floor. We have the second floor, which is slightly wider to give some depth. We have the roof, which has a pitch to shed water, and we have the addition that also has a roof on top of it. I am very adamant that all you really need to have a good house is a good idea. This part behind me, this outlining and blocking in, is absolutely the most important part of making a house. When you're planning out your house, perhaps you're in a creative world making outlines like this, I want you to think about the house like it's a real building. It has to have rooms, it has to have floors, it has to have roofs, because Minecraft imitates real life, and although your build doesn't have to be so realistic that it could literally stand up in real life, it does have to have at least some kind of sense. They have to be built with logic, or else people will look at them and see that they just seem off. Here's an example of what not to do when planning out a house. It's just a rectangle. It's not interesting, it does not have a roof, it doesn't even look like a house. A lot of people might build this way when they're first starting out, but I encourage you to think a little bit harder about what you're building in Minecraft. An easy way to improve the composition of a house is simply to add a roof. Roofs are realistic, they make your house look a bit more like a house, and they give it more interest. A lot of people don't really understand how to make roofs, and they'll often just have them be flat, but have some shingles coming off the side. Now that is technically a thing in real life, and it looks like this. They're pretty horrible, and they're usually used to save on costs while making it look like it has a roof, but I encourage you not to do that in Minecraft. In this case, I have just made a 45-degree angle pitch. Now you can make this taller and skinnier by having each one go up by 2, or you can make it flatter by having each one go in by 2, like this. Roofs can get complicated if you have lots of shapes in your house, which is why I think you should plan out where your roof will go before you start building your house. If you hear online that square-shaped houses are ugly and you try to make your base a little bit more interesting by making the floor plan like this, it's obvious that making the roof is going to be very complicated. So when trying to lay out your house to make it more interesting, you should be laying it out in blocks, not just sort of random assortments like this. This is a somewhat more coherent way to lay out a house. As you can see, it's a collection of squares, and each one of this can have its own pitch. For example, this is an L-shaped house divided into 2 squares. This one will have its roof going like this at a 45-degree angle, or whatever other angle you'll be using. This one will have the same, but it will be perpendicular to it. This one might have a smaller slope, but it might not go all the way up to the top. It might be an addition like that one over there. And this one might possibly be the same, perhaps only rising to the first story. Doing this will greatly simplify the process of making a roof, and making a proper roof is often what a build needs to look good. When designing the shape of a building, it's also important to know that you should not make it all flat and one-dimensional. This building here I would describe as being flat and one-dimensional. It is just a square, and that is all it is. Even if it had some bits coming out like this way, if it was an L-shaped house and had 2 roofs intersecting, it still wouldn't look very interesting because there is no varying heights. Here you can see that the top floor gets a block bigger, which creates a bit of a shadow down here. That looks pretty good. It adds some contrast, it adds some interest to a building that would otherwise be one giant flat wall. This addition here also does not rise to the full height of the building, it only goes halfway up, which adds a little bit of layering. It makes it more complicated and intricate, despite being fairly simple to build. Composition is fairly subjective, and it involves a lot of creating something and looking back and saying, does that quite look good? But really, I can't stress enough the importance of laying out your building and having simple shapes. This house behind me isn't even made of real materials yet. It already looks pretty good. That is because the outline of your house is really the most important part. You can have bad detailing, and your house will still look good if it is built with a good idea. This is where a good portion of your time should be going. Here I have blocked in some materials for my house. This might also seem trivial, like everyone knows how to make materials for their house, but I want to mention that it's very important to get the right materials. This house is not all stone, nor is it all wood. It has a combination of both, because contrast is very important. There has to be some bit of different colors. Notice how this part is also not stone, because then there would be this large horizontal section that would be just stone, but I'm wanting to add a little bit of staggering. So the wood comes down here and the stone stays here so that we don't have any lines that are going all the way horizontal across or all the way up. This is a general principle in building. You don't want to generally have lots of very long unbroken lines. Sometimes it can be useful, but generally you want to stagger things like this. That's a good idea. Of course, your artistic license can be used. Sometimes you can do things that are generally not good, but maybe can work in some situations, but this is usually the best way to go about things. Hopefully you're noticing that this is starting to look a little bit like a medieval house, even though it has absolutely no texturing or detailing. This is just simple, large blocks of color put together in a way that look like a house. Now I have added some detail to my house behind me. Now you might be thinking this is a little bit of a jump from just having some blocks colored in. Well, I have an explanation for all of this, and it wouldn't have worked otherwise. As I said earlier, a house is the sum of its parts. That doesn't just apply to the shape of the house, but it also applies to all of the details. Every detail here represents something. And starting off with the door, obviously it is a door. It's not just random blocks thrown together to make it look good, it's a door. This here, this is a window. These here, these are logs that support the roof and the building above. Doing stuff like this was a common building technique back in the day. I mean, in the medieval times, they would use these to hold up the structure above, so they have a meaning. This bit of detail here is made of windows. These are shutters. You've probably seen these before. They're a great design, and I encourage anyone who wants good windows to use them. These are the window panes. They're made of wood because medieval people didn't have glass, and this is meant to be a medieval house. These are little thingamajigs that hold up this overhang of the roof. They probably have a name, but I don't know them. These are present over here, but I've changed the color to dark oak because if they were spruce, they'd be too similar to this color. This is also a window. This is also a door. These are kind of just decorative, but they aren't sort of strewn about like this. If you ever see someone doing this, you know that they're a noob. They all mark the bottom part, which makes this building look a little bit shorter and this look a little taller. I did say you don't want to have a big, long horizontal line. I guess this is sort of an exception, but it's not entirely horizontal since it comes out this way. Like I said, composition gets kind of difficult, and I don't expect that your builds will look immediately like this, but you can use the general principle that if you want your building to be detailed, don't just throw things together. Instead, think there should be windows, there should be doors. Make your windows and doors look good. See this? I just put a door design that I already had, and a window design that I already had, and a this thing design that I already had together, and it created this, which is fairly detailed, and you might look at it and say, hey, that looks pretty good. It didn't take me very long to make. You can even Google some window ideas or door ideas or any other kind of ideas, and you can put them together to make something like this. I've also added in some white because generally I like to have more than just one color in here. There's brown, but this would have been rather boring if it was all spruce. This is like a variety of plaster that you'll see in a lot of German buildings particularly. Contrast is a very important element in design. Don't have everything be all the same color or all the same texture or all the same shape. Here is an example of what not to do when building. This is a build that I made several years ago, and it is an example of what people call block vomit. Absolutely everything just thrown together with not a care in the world. Notice how you can't really pick out what everything means here. These logs just kind of come off for some reason. This is sort of just a a fence gate that's put there. This is just, why don't we make this wall lumpy for some reason? Because that makes sense. Why is this roof so lumpy as well? Have you ever seen a roof that looks like that in real life? Probably not, unless it's a building that's been abandoned for 50 years. This kind of building doesn't necessarily look terrible, but it usually will not look as good as if you simply plan out, prepare, and create buildings that are logical, where everything has a purpose and a meaning. Let's be honest, this is literally the definition of block vomit. You might be wondering why I haven't talked about texturing yet. Behind me is the fully finished version of this build, or at least mostly finished version of this build that I made for the thumbnail. It has a bit of texturing, and obviously it adds quite a bit to the build, but I didn't really explain in detail how to texture, and that's because I feel like texturing is something you should be learning after you learn how to build. Modern Minecraft builds are usually flat walls with crazy gradients all over them. All of the builders are all so obsessed with texturing, but I feel like it's kind of overrated. So although it is something that you could consider, it's not something that I think you should be focusing entirely on, especially if you don't know how to make basic detailing first. I will give a bit of an overview on how I've constructed this texturing though. The way I go about things when texturing, and this is not at all a meta way or even really a great way, is that I'll just kind of mix in some stone and cobblestone randomly, and then I'll put darker blocks like tuff at the bottom, and I do the same for all of the other blocks here. I just pick blocks that are similar to it and mix them in. It's very arbitrary because I'm not amazing at texturing, but doing this will make it look a little bit better, and it's fairly easy. If you follow these steps that I have outlined, you will find yourself being able to build pretty decent builds like this one pretty consistently. Now, this tutorial isn't going to make you a grand master of building, because becoming really good at building takes a lot of time and practice. That's kind of where a lot of the skill comes from. It's mainly about composition, like I said, and that is something you just need to practice. If you enjoy building, you'll probably do more building and you'll learn over time. Like I said, I've been building for literally decades, and there was a time when I was making oak boxes with no roofs in trees. I was building tree houses. It was a time to be alive. I just want to clarify, I have not been building for decades. Minecraft hasn't even been out for decades, and if you couldn't tell from my voice, I am not nearly old enough to have been doing anything for decades. But hopefully you found this video helpful. This is how I have built everything in my life, and I have made some pretty cool things, as I said. So hopefully you can use this strategy to make some pretty cool things yourself too. If you appreciated this tutorial, maybe you could like and subscribe. Maybe you could also join my Minecraft server, Conquest SMP. The link is in the description. It's been running forever and it's never going to die, hopefully. Anyway, that's all I have to say, so I'm now going to leave. Bye. Composition is a fairly subjective science. Wait, no. Composition is fairly suggestive. Oh, wow. Composition is fairly. What the heck? Okay, dude. I swear.